All right, this morning, since we've covered many things with Mongo, we're going to start going to the next level with this. And we're going to begin by actually kind of building a project. And the remaining videos in this series are going to be private for subscribers only. And then for ETL students, this is where the course, I should say the project begins. We're going to, in the course, go to the next level on this. So the YouTube channel will kind of cover the basics, and that's because I don't really want to spend a lot of time in the course covering the basics. It's more about the advanced stuff. And so this YouTube channel will just cover the basics. Like I said, the remaining videos will be private, so be sure to watch the trailer to see how to get access to the private videos if you have not yet. So the basics here are inserting data into a database. That's one of the beginning points. And one of the things that we know about Mongo is if the database does not exist, if we do an insert, it will actually add the value to the database. What I mean by that, to the collection. So what I mean by that is if we don't have a value, or we don't have a collection, then let's call it collection 1. And we don't have a collection 1, but we insert a value into collection 1, the collection 1 suddenly starts to exist, okay? And so that's what we're going to do. We're basically going to create a non-existent database. Collection. So if you'll give me 1 minute, we're going to do this, of course, in PowerShell. And we're going to connect to it. And for Udemy students, if you have questions, there's 3 hours worth of PowerShell videos. Starts very basic, but by the end you're doing some very advanced stuff in PowerShell. And that's very useful because, again, PowerShell is an object-oriented language. You can do a lot of different things with it, and it's one of the easiest languages to learn. So in 3 hours, you could actually be doing some pretty advanced stuff and understand exactly what you're doing. So we have a database here, SQL and 6, in Mongo. We have this collection, or habit example, which does not exist. We're going to add some various DLLs, and I cover in our course what this means. And then we're going to establish MongoDB, basically a connection to MongoDB. And you'll notice, for those of you who are my students, it does actually differ than the SQL Server connections, and that's okay. Each connection has their peculiarities. It's just important to note. We're then going to establish that collection here, which is tied to our habit example. So it's looking for this MongoDB connection in this collection. And we're going to insert a value into that collection, okay? And you'll notice that we're going to insert a value. 1, completed, test complete. 2, progress, test complete, test progress 2. And since this is ID 1, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to set these to 1. And so we're going to fire this off, okay? And before, this didn't exist. And now when we call it, you'll notice that it exists. So by inserting a document to a collection that doesn't exist, it creates the collection. Now, and I want to do this just to generate this error. If I were to fire this again, we're going to get an error, and it's that duplicate key error. Why? Well, because this is 1 and we already have 1. If I change this to 2, it will insert with no problem. And if I go back to the database, you'll notice that we have 2, okay? So in our course, as we continue, one of the things is we're going to kind of create a process in which we're going to use our habit example here to store some information. And we're going to, when we store that information, basically we're going to attach information from files to that. And then for the ETL students, we're going to go that next level and we're going to start doing some more like organization and whatnot. And the goal here is you become very familiar with MongoDB. You start to become very familiar with how to use MongoDB. You have some of the basics down about the insert, but that way you can play around with it and you can start building your own databases for your own purposes. And there's just a difference. I can say this as people who have interviewed so many people. There's a difference between someone who works on projects themselves and has their own projects going on. And you're going to see some of the cool things you can do with MongoDB. And a difference between someone who is not. And it's very obvious, the difference, because that person who's played around just knows some of those nuances that other people do not know. And so that's what we're going to do over this course. And then this SQL and 6 channel will mainly cover some of the more basics part of the project. And so for those of you who are ETL students, I would suggest to go through this just so that you know where we're at. And then we're going to kind of pick up where we left off. And we're going to go through the extract, the transform, and then, of course, the load process.